Hani Mamasani. I'm director of the Transportation Center, and I'm also a holder of the Patterson Chair in Transportation. And as the holder of the Patterson Chair, I have the distinct pleasure and the privilege of introducing our annual Patterson Lecture speaker. Now, you may know that the Patterson Lecture was established at Northwestern about 38 years ago, because this is the 38th Patterson Lecture, Distinguished Patterson Lecture. And it is delivered annually by a leader of industry who is selected by a group of faculty and industry stakeholders. So over the years, we've had again, the privilege of hosting leaders of industry from all modes of transportation. And this year is no exception. And so it is my distinct pleasure to introduce today's speaker. So he is the head of Uber Freight. Before that, he was one of the co-founders of Otto, which is a self-driving trucking company, an innovator and a leader. Before that, he spent many years with Google in their map and location services division. And previously, he had been chief technology officer with the Israeli army. And so it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. Lior Ron as our 38th Distinguished Patterson Speaker. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hi, full house. That's great. I know I'm doing something right if I'm in Chicago and it's a beautiful sunny summer evening and the lakeshore is full of people playing volleyball, and back home in SF it's rainy and I can't even get a flight back to land in SFO. So excited to be in Chicago. I see a lot of friends, a lot of colleagues in the audience, a lot of students. Great to see you. And really thanks for hosting me here. I'm honored. He just informed me coming on stage that I'm probably the youngest speaker. I don't know if it's ever here. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll take it for face value. So thanks for having me. Excited to share what we've been up to in logistics, and exciting to also share some of the journey. So I'll go through some slides, and we'll talk a bit about the history and where we're going in the future, and then we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. So think about our conversations after that. So topic today is Uberizing logistics. This is what we're all doing at Uber and Uber Freight, which is really Uber's logistics arm. Where we are very focused on the future of logistics and how do we actually create and help facilitate that future. And before we talk about the future, I wanted to start with a bit of the history and talk about my journey and what led us here. So it started with a small company in Mountain View named Google about 15 years ago. And that company have a very audacious vision and mission statement, organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And it's always start with a very ambitious and very audacious vision, really bringing all of this online information together, make it searchable, make it universally accessible. I chose to go to a part of the company that I personally found fascinating, which is the mapping division. And there, we had a very similar mission. The difference is we started from this. We started with an offline world. If you remember, once upon a time, we had paper maps. And we used to actually look around with paper maps. And we used to carry those maps. Hopefully you remember in the audience in the back, we had paper maps in our pocket when we came as a tourist to Chicago 20 years ago and trying to figure out where to go. So we started with basically an offline infrastructure of how to go around and how to find stuff and how to orient yourself around the world. And we had a mission and we had a belief 15 years ago that we can bring that offline world to online. And our mission was basically to create the perfect mirror universe and bring all of this information online and create a new geo-infrastructure for the world around us. So like every ambitious journey, it starts with MVP, a mean viable product. And that was our MVP in 2005. So a sea of blue with just two countries on the map, US and UK, nothing else. We didn't know anything about any of the other countries. We barely knew what the states are, as you can see on the map. We had some extremely rudimentary search, but that was the starting point. And this is when I joined the team back in 2005. And really the journey ever since, over the decade, is to bring that offline world online and really digitize the physical world around us. And we took everything available to us in the physical world, satellite maps, street view, information, web results, and we digitize it. We build a digital map. And fast forward to the present, we all know and love Google Maps, and just the extent of digital infrastructure that we connected from here's campus, from the building footprints, to the POIs, to the details on every small local businesses, to what places we should go around us, how much time will it actually take us together. That took a decade of moving one step at a time. And in the process, I've learned a few things, and there were a couple of unlocks that I just want to spend a second talking about. One was actually putting people in the middle and empowering people with the power of technology. So this is an unknown product that was part of Google Maps. It's called Google Maps Map Maker. And what that allowed is to basically give the power of mapping to local citizens and local experts around the world. And once we've actually unleashed that power to those local cartographers, and this is an example of one of the smallest cities in the Philippines. This is August 12, 2008. We knew nothing about the Philippines. As a matter of fact, there was not even an online map of the Philippines at the time. This is what happened when we put people in the center and actually provided them those tools. Well, not this. Oops. OK, here we go. So every second here is a day. And you can start seeing the streets, the shopping mall, the local school, the hospital, the river just emerged out of thin air, the water line, the neighborhood, the houses, the parks, everything. Out of a physical universe emerged an online representation of that once we put people in the center and once we actually empowered and gave them the tools. And that animation, that happened across the world. The first ever online maps of India, the first ever online maps of Africa, the first online maps of Pakistan, of South America, really tapping into people's need to express themselves and put themselves on the map and unleash that creativity. So that helped us get from those two countries to 160 or 180. The other unlock and the other learning was really the power of mobile and location. When we started, mobile phones didn't exist or existed to some degree. GPS and location wasn't actually widely available for consumers. As we built that global infrastructure, the mobile phone emerged, and that really unleashed the next unlock and the next ability for people to express themselves, to find things around them, and to really have this very deep location signal that allows us to then introduce driving directions, introduce Google Maps Mobile, introduce the next level of information in that journey. And we built that. That was a 10-year adventure. really bringing a fully physical presence to an online world. We started when I joined with about 1 million users. We ended up with 1 billion users. We started with 2 states, 2 countries. We ended up with 180. We started with barely knowing states. We, in the end, knew every building footprint and every entrance and every small driving directions in every city globally. And as part of that, we've also unlocked, once we had that societal infrastructure in place, we have unlocked new use cases and new opportunities we didn't even think about that will exist when we've built Google Maps. And one of them was another small company out of San Francisco that was built on top of that infrastructure. Once we had that rich online universe, once we had that rich online maps, companies like Uber were able to emerge to really connect using that online infrastructure 2 sides of the marketplace and using mobile phones and using location and using Google Maps, really bring again to an offline marketplace. I'm sure you all remember how it was calling taxis a couple of years ago. Bring that online metamorphose and change into an offline universe full of inefficiency and friction. Because this is what technology is doing. It streamlines things, it connects things, in this case connects both sides of the marketplace, drivers and consumers, and when it's connected, it builds trust. And that's the trust we now have at Uber. You don't plan your airport ride weeks in advance, and you just know your Uber car is going to wait there, and your driver is going to wait there in 3, 4, 5 minutes, but it's always going to be there for you. That's the level of trust that technology, in the end of the day, can actually achieve. So that Google Maps paved the way to Uber. Uber really created this amazing transportation infrastructure, and on top of that, we stand on the shoulders of giants, me and my colleagues at Uber. We can really think about how to apply that and apply those concepts into logistics, which is what we're doing with Uber Freight. Really bringing that offline logistics universe online, digitizing it, because we fundamentally believe if we can actually streamline, digitize, connect everything, we can build that trust in logistics as a service. And we'll talk more about that in a second. So just to put the framing around logistics, I wanted to take a quick historical detour and talk about where logistics came from. And it came from here, early days of trade. Trade is a necessity that we all have from very early days. This is actually one of the first things that was traded. 17,000 BC. It's a precious stone obsidian. It was used for arrows and some very early tools, and it was in high demand. So there was a system of trade between villages and between places of trading that stone. And as after that emerged other types of trade. Amber, the gold of the north, the precious stone in the Roman Empire. Chinese started to trade the spices. So trade is in all of us, and it's a sort of a basic human necessity. And the history of logistics is really a history of technological transformations or unlocks. So let me quickly walk through some of them. So you want to trade, you want to barter, you actually want to have logistics. The first technological breakthrough was roads. So the first roads were actually built in Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago. First lane for the trucking people in the audience between Ur and Babylon, of actually starting to trade stuff between cities, because you need to trade and you need to exchange goods, and there are no established roads to actually do that. So the first roads emerged in there 4,000 years ago, or 5,000, 6,000 years ago, because the need to trade. So that was the initial unlock, and once the first road emerged, then you had the first logistical network, which is actually a series of roads, Silk Road. Once you actually start connecting those nodes, and you start seeing a migration of goods from west, textile, fruit, glassware, to China and east, and from east, silk, paper, spices, to west. So you start seeing actually a network of goods exchanging, and a backhaul system emerged of goods being delivered to China and back. But really the unlock there was roads. Streamlining the interface of how to move stuff, connecting everything together, and building that trust. So you start seeing those roads. The next unlock was money, because now you exchange goods and you need a standardized way to actually exchange that. So here we enter money into the story. And first coins really out of Turkey, 1600 BC, of having a weight, basically a precious stone, gold or silver, costing a specific price, really to standardize price and trade across those commerce and across those traders. And again, the same process, money slowly but surely move from offline to the notes we had in our pockets to a digital currency that just gets all the friction out of the way, allow us to connect the entire financial system. 98 to 99% of all money today traded is fully digital. It never actually gets to a physical form altogether. And now we just walk with a phone in our pocket that has all our financial information, all our money, all of that physical infrastructure is now fully digital, and that unlocked the next level of growth for logistics and trade. And then the last recent unlock, again, how do you standardize once you have money, once you have a global ecosystem of trade? The next unlock was containers. Malcolm McLean, a true visionary, in '56, really standardizing the interface of moving things around on a global setting and overcoming all of the friction and the mistrust of not knowing what sizes will those boxes come, what should I actually expect to see, and all the fragmentation of actually how to do that interaction. Decided to just take a leap and retrofit an oil tanker carrying 58 containers out of Newark to Houston for the first time, and really introducing for the first time a standardized system of containers of how to trade. So I think we see a theme here. Every technology transformation, roads, money, containers, those are all high tech of that time, really unlock the next level of logistics growth. Because in the end of the day, what technology can do and what technology enables us to do is to streamline and standardize. Once we streamline, we can actually connect everything together. And once we connect everything together, we can build trust in that trade and physical network, trust that allows us to then transact and get to the next level. So this is really what we view as the role of technology. And talking on the past present, that gets us to the here and today now. And we're talking about basically the logistics that is moving the economy. And the economy essentially runs on trucks. We all know the numbers, right? $8 trillion of a market globally, 12% of global GDP, essentially how the world is running. But it's running in the wrong direction. It's running in the wrong direction because every stakeholder in that ecosystem is under structural pressure, and every stakeholder in the ecosystem is not really benefiting from how things are set up today. And I'll start with drivers, because for us, and I think for everyone, it's always driver first. And there are 4 million of those drivers in the US, dozens of millions of those drivers globally. This used to be the epitome of the American dream, a decent, well-paid, middle-income profession, and that's no longer the case. And those drivers are in a tin box going to the other side of the continent 200 nights a year, away from their family, waiting in facilities 4 or 5 hours a day. The traffic jams on the roads are not happening actually on the roads. They're happening in facilities where they're waiting hours and hours every day to be loaded and unloaded. The average age in the industry was 35 20 years ago. It was 45 10 years ago. It's now almost 55. It's the same baby boomers that have joined the industry. And it's hard to establish and sustain and grow a trucking company in the US today. And there's a million of those small businesses and small entrepreneurs trying to build a system. So hard for them and hard for them to actually gain opportunities of shipping opportunities at scale. If we flip the coin on the other side of the market, shippers are not having fun as well. It's because of the fundamental challenges of drivers, it's very hard for those shippers. We have actually many folks in the room from the Business Advisory Council. It's very hard for those shippers, big or small, to transact with logistics, to find the truck, to find the capacity, to find the drivers, and as a result, almost every production cost in the US in the past few decades has gone down. The only cost that continued to climb up is transportation cost. For one of our customers is a to be named water bottle company. For the bottle of water that we all drink in our leisure today, the cost of transporting that water nowadays is 30% of the cost of that bottle. 30%. For the cost of basic food necessities, personal core, 15, 20% of the cost, the production cost of that good is actually now the cost of transporting that good around. So we're facing a crisis on the shipping side as well. Those shippers cannot access the long end of capacity at scale and efficiently. They cannot control the transportation cost, and it impacts the big shippers, but it also impacts the small shippers. There's 1 million small businesses in the US that are trying to grow and sustain their business, and it's very hard for them to actually interact and transact with logistics because the friction is very high and they're underserved. So really empowering those 1 million small businesses as well. And not to mention the ecosystem, which is just inherently inefficient by definition. So 20 to 30% of all trucks around us on the road are actually running empty, completely empty. Almost 50% of those private fleets that those shippers actually own are unutilized. And if you sum all of the waste in the system today, some of it is inherent, some of it we can do a lot about, you actually get to almost 1.5% of US greenhouses are just because trucks are running empty. Transportation is now the biggest US greenhouse emitter, bigger than energy as of last year, and trucks represents almost a third of US greenhouses as part of that. So you have a system and you have an economy that is basically 12% of global GDP, but yet every participant, drivers, shipper, the ecosystem are just not benefiting, and we think we can help facilitate a better way. So fast forward to today, we fundamentally believe we're in a timing where technology is at an inflection point, and we have a bunch of new enablers that are allowing us to create a new logistics network. If you just look at the past decade, a lot of things have actually changed. Every one of those drivers is now mobile enabled. If you ask them, they'll actually tell you that their most important working tool beside their truck is their mobile phone. They live and breathe their business on that. So every user in the system is now connected. Every asset is now connected. Remember the GPS? The cost of actually putting a GPS chip or an IoT chip and tracking an asset today or a pallet today is cents. For a few cents, you can actually track perfectly the location of every asset in that ecosystem. And we're living in an era where if you actually put machines on top of all the data, you can derive a lot of insights because the era of machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data is upon us. So we fundamentally believe that all of those together is creating the perfect storm. And really our vision is to leverage all of those fundamental changes to create a logistics on-demand platform. And really, through technology, streamlining, connecting all sides of the marketplace, shippers and drivers, in a very convenient way, we can build that trust. We can connect the right truck at the right time for the right shipper at the right price instantly. Because once you actually connect everything, things start moving in the speed of light, not in the speed of people. So this is what we're trying to do. That's our audacious goal. And we believe the fundamental technology transformation are here. And it's the same basic unlock that has happened across the history we will see in the next decade. So, how do we do that? It really starts always from the driver, so let me actually play a quick clip of the drivers. If we can put the audio on.
I bring you everything you need to stay alive. In any weather, at any time, without ever seeing my family. And there's a high chance I may die doing it. And you treat me like crap. That's the job. I will initially look at Uber Freight as this is going to liberate the freight. Just like it liberated the taxi situation and all that. That's how I look at it. It's going to take the freight, put it on one place, and it's going to limit it to a mathematical equation. You're this close. Does it fit your criteria? You take it. That's how I feel.
So that's Trucker Brown, one of our first driver partners and an avid user of Uber Freight. And what he said is really common for a lot of those drivers that really believe in the power of technology to transform their livelihood. And for us, it really starts from empowering those drivers with technology through the Uber Freight app that really understands them, understand where they're going, understanding their preference, bring all of that information in their fingertips, all of that information. They can book the load with one touch button. They can actually hold the load without talking to anyone if they don't choose to. We empower them. Remember the map maker animation? We give them a voice to actually share what they think about the facilities and their experience so shippers can actually improve their livelihood in those facilities. And all of that is done in a very easy to use way with all the information and with the power of machine learning to really understand what's the right opportunities for them, how can we actually present them in the best and fastest way, how can we actually empower them with personal recommendation based on who they are, where they're going, when they want to be with their family, how much earnings they actually want to do, what kind of equipment they want to haul, what facilities they actually prefer. And all of that is basically used to make that process as streamlined as possible. So that's a bit on the app. And it starts with the app, but really putting the driver in the center is really about reimagining what it means to be a truck driver in the US today. So it starts with the app. It changes how you actually interact and do business. I can book now before going to sleep at my truck stop. I can have recommendations and really make sure I have the right opportunities. I have the support and trust that I need, but it goes through offering them a host of other services where they can operate their business much more effectively. Fuel, insurance, phone bills, health insurance, a host of other services, offering them quick payment. The average industry payment today is 60 to 90 days for those small business owners to actually wait to be paid. We pay them almost instantly. And really taking a lot of the cost out of their business by offering them access to trailers that allows them to save that 4 or 5 hours they're waiting in facilities and just have access to be able to drop whatever they're carrying at the facility and just pick up something else and vice versa. So really putting everything we can and centering around the drivers and doing that at scale and really obsessing about how can we leverage technology to empower those small business owners. And we had a bit of a small event last week, if you noticed, but maybe something you haven't noticed is actually Tiffany. She's standing behind Dara on the left in the pink dress. Tiffany is one of the drivers. She's a military vet, spent almost 15 years in the military, then trained truck drivers in a company for almost a decade. She always had a dream to actually be a business owner and take the leap. And with the app, with the ability to actually find the right loads for her, with the trailer pool and the ability to actually have access to a trailer pool, with the quick payments, with the insurance, with everything else, she was able actually to do just that last year. She now actually owns 8 trucks. She operates her fleet 24/7 as a matter of 5, a military vet, and really providing her that opportunity. So that was like a great moment for the team, being able to highlight her as part of the IPO last week. So when you treat drivers and we really center technology around them and you really think how can we actually provide them the tools and the power to run their business, this is what you get. So back to logistics on demand. This is the Uber Freight network that we have built just over the past 24 months. You start seeing how we started in some of the more mature regions like Texas and California, and how we made progress. Every blue dot on this map is a driver, either picking up or dropping off, or a driver on their way to a route to a shipping facility. Every one of those dots is a mobile-enabled app where we actually understand exactly what a driver wants to do, cater to his or her needs, and really allow us to ramp up our network across the US so we can actually move that offline infrastructure to an online universe. So now we have basically the entire, or a small part, of the US freight network completely online with that capacity. And what that allows us then to do is actually build the digital things on top of that logistics on demand platform. So I want to talk about a few of the things that we can do once we have that offline infrastructure fully online. So what happens when you actually understand where truck drivers are at real time, when you understand what demand is at real time, when you understand everything that's going on? So a few things can start to happen. One is pricing. You can actually understand supply and demand in real time. You can understand where those drivers are going. You can understand sort of the ebbs and flow of freight. And you can offer things like that, sort of Expedia for logistics or Expedia for freight that allows, remember those small business owners, a million of those, to actually be much more effective and efficient in how they run their logistics. They can, like all of us, just book a flight ticket on a website. They can go to the Uber Freight platform and choose if they want to actually get a truck on a Monday 9 a.m. or a Wednesday 4 p.m. based on real-time supply and demand and forecasting, click a button, book that load, and optimize the truck and the logistics based on the most effective rate and the most convenient rate for them. So once you have online, you can start automating pricing, and you can actually start connecting the dots between supply and demand. What else happens once you actually have a fully online platform? Things start moving much faster. So actually, a big chunk of the transactions on the platform today are closed within a second. Just to give you a sense, it takes hours today in today's industry. Once you connected to all the shipper system, once you connected with a fully digital enabled supply base, you can start actually closing the loops in seconds. So what happens when you can actually start transacting in a marketplace within seconds? Things like that. So this is an example of a real shipper, one of our customers, and they had a shipment to actually haul between the origin facility to the destination warehouse. And there was an initial driver assigned to that load coming out of the original destination. And his truck broke. That happened. More than 10% of those loads, something happened. So he had to cancel and what we call bounce out of that load. Usually that emerges and results in a frantic, let's find someone else to actually pick up that load. What happens with a fully online marketplace with a logistics on-demand platform is the second the driver opted out was the second that load was being put back on the marketplace, was the second it was automatically priced based on real-time supply and demand, and it was the second a new driver that happened to be actually closer to the destination picked up that load and actually arrived to the destination 15 minutes before. If that reminds me of you of something, that's sort of what happens when your Uber driver cancels on you. It's the power that that platform can allow us to actually do. The system is basically self-healing itself because we can transact instantly and because we have that online infrastructure. So take that one example and now apply that at scale, and you start seeing things like that. So Hurricane Harvey hit Texas 2 years ago now, completely disrupting the entire supply chain in Texas, basically millions of people not actually giving access to fresh water. One of our customers are Niagara. They produce almost half of every mineral water in the US, they saw that and wanted to push track capacity and actually deliver mineral water, fresh mineral water to the residents in Texas. Now, the issue, this was actually on a Sunday evening, where most of the traditional partners are actually closed, and regardless of that, you just want to push a lot of capacity in real time in an instant. And what happened after is basically what you see on that map, where 127 trucks were automatically dispatched within 30 minutes on a Sunday afternoon into Texas with the power of the platform and with the power of the app, with us having one support person back in the office supporting that in Chicago. Again, that transaction we saw before, amplified when the system actually breaks and you get that scale logistics on demand opportunities. And that's where you can start seeing the transformation. Always when the system is most stressed, you can start seeing people shifting habits and people actually leaning on the future. We saw the same happening with Google Maps when disasters happen. So, one transaction, 127 transaction, and the list goes on. This is something we just announced last week, which is, think about it as a capacity API. So now, if it's actually online, you can actually plug it as a programmatic API to logistics systems. So we just announced a partnership with SAP, where from the ERP system or from the transportation management system of an organization, there's an Uber Freight button that the shippers can actually click, and that will guarantee their capacity and allow them to actually fulfill that truck demand instantly, the same way you basically plug a piece of code into a system, again, because we have that online infrastructure now in place. And think about all the things you can do once you actually programmatically embed trucking capacity on demand to anything you can do with software. Another example of where things are going, really connecting demand and supply in real time. So our colleagues' business are Uber Eats, with the logistics arm. Uber Eats is really building the future of food delivery. Imagine a world where the point of sale system in a restaurant understand in real time what's happening to the goods in that restaurant and can actually automatically fetch a new truck to fulfill those goods and fulfill those supply in the restaurant, again, because everything is now moving online and we have limited some of the manual friction that just makes this process today extremely hard to do. The other thing that happens in that future is self-driving. So self-driving trucks will happen, and we fundamentally believe it will be part of the future. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take a while for this to ramp up. This is not going to happen this month, not next month, not next year, but it's very clear this is where things are going. And we also fundamentally believe that trucking is still going to be one of the primary, if not the first, use cases to actually be deployed, because this is what robots and computers see when they drive on a highway, and this is our mental processing and why it's actually much easier and pleasant for us to drive on a highway versus on a city street. Just the amount of processing, the amount of objects are much less so. There's no random pedestrians or bikes. It's a very structured environment where things are moving in a very defined direction, and if they're not moving in a very defined direction, you can basically notice that and do something. So fundamentally, the highway problem, and as such, the trucking problem is easier, not easy, but easier to solve. So as such, we view self-driving as part of the future, but none of this will be commercially viable or deployable anytime soon without the network. Because the first self-driving truck, your guess is as good as mine, and when is that going to happen, is probably going to be in the middle of Arizona with perfect sunlight, with free lanes, looking 2 miles of completely full visibility between 1 and 5 a.m. When there's no construction jobs. But that's what I just described is actually not a commercial deployment. you need a network and you need drivers to fall back on between outside of all of that constraint that I've just articulated. That's one. The second thing we're going to see and why the network is so essential is really while the highway problem might be actually solvable and actually in very high need, because again, drivers inherently, it's more challenging to be going to the other side of the country. So the highways will become slowly but surely more of sort of a virtual train on wheels. The first and last miles are going to remain extremely critical and extremely challenging. And what we're going to see is actually drivers and self-driving trucks working together as part of that network in a model that might look like this, where the drivers are actually doing the first mile out of the warehouse manually, gets to a depot or a trucking or a yard, a similar yard to where you actually move containers into rail today, pick up the robot or the self-driving truck is awaiting in that yard, picks up the load and goes on that extremely constrained section of the highway where self-driving was solved, gets to the other side of that segment, delivers the load, and the driver dispatched by the network based on supply and demand, based on timing, based on orchestrating all of this together, is awaiting to do the last mile drop-off to the facility. And you kind of want those assets to be highly utilized, similar to airlines, where you have a high-cost asset, and it's critical for that asset to be fully utilized on that highway back and forth, and basically feeding that highway portion with demand and making sure the drivers are on both ends. Drivers can actually now stay locally, be much more utilized with short drops, first and last mile, and still play a significant role on the highway in all of those cases where self-driving is not going to be ready for the foreseeable future. And again, the precondition to do that future is actually a fully dense logistics on-demand network where you can actually tap that utility and tap that hose on demand on both ends to utilize those assets. So we do view the network as an essential ingredient to the future of self-driving, the same way that the Uber network is an essential component of the future of self-driving cars. So this is what we're building, a global on-demand logistics network. We believe the fundamental building blocks are here. It's going to be a long road. It's going to be an ambitious vision of bringing that offline world online. We fundamentally believe this will usher a new era of opportunities in logistics. And we fundamentally believe that Uber is a great place to build that. As the biggest transportation company in the world, we stand on the shoulders of giants, not just in Uber, but also out of the industry. And we're looking forward for the future of logistics in Uber and outside. And with that, thank you very much, and we'll open into Q&A.
Thank you very much, Lior, for a very interesting presentation. I'm sure there will be quite a few questions. So some ground rules. When you have a question, please indicate that to us. We will come to you with a microphone. And when you ask your question, please identify yourself first. So who wants to start?
Hi, my name is Ilse Seidels, and it's interesting that you mentioned the person in the picture that owned 8 tractors. I myself own 8 tractors that I lease back to my family's group of trucking companies. And the way I get paid is rent, but also all that rent comes from contract hauling between the trucking company and the shipper. And how does Uber see itself getting into that contract business, because you need density to create the model? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are for going into that contract bit of business.
Great question, and thank you. So actually, when I talk about logistics on demand and the instant nature, people immediately think about spot and instant execution. The reality actually is we build basically a new digital infrastructure. Once you build that, some of the things will be instant, some of the things will be actually much longer time frame. So we're building the building blocks that allows us to actually also do longer term engagement and contracts. Most of our business today is contractual, working with some of those biggest shippers. So we definitely believe that contract is part of the future. And our role there is to bring much more trust into the whole dance of contracting in the industry, allow both sides to understand better sort of what are they getting into, and really bring transparency of how the contracts are actually being procured, how they're executed, what's actually happening, to again build the trust on both sides. But we're definitely playing a big part in contracts. And I do see a future where we can actually play a bit of a more supporting role to direct contracts like you have with the shipper, where even if it's not transacting directly on our platform, we can still bring some of those tools, some of those enablers, some of those fundamental building blocks, so the transaction you have directly with your shipper, with nothing with us in between, can actually just be better and more pleasant.
Hi, my name is Oren Rozowski. Thanks for speaking today. I have a question about the different types of shippers that exist that Uber likely works with. What are the barriers to working with the larger shippers in the U.S. and the world that move thousands of loads a year versus the shippers that move 5 to 10 loads a year?
It's a great question. So we fundamentally believe in walking before running, like everything else. And actually, we started in our humble beginnings 24 months ago with the small shippers and really sort of like hone our process and hone our craft, so we'll actually be able to serve those bigger shippers that have obviously higher demands and higher standards, and for us to actually make sure that we can serve them well and build that service and building the trust that is paramount for anything you do with any shipper, especially the bigger ones. So I think for us, the reality is, it's sequencing, it's building the muscles as we go to be able to actually serve those. And I haven't spoken about all the people behind the scenes. We actually have some of my colleagues here based in Chicago that are leading a lot of our amazing operational teams that are really the lifeblood and the engine of the company at the end of the day. You want to make sure that you provide excellent service with people that are jumping whenever the technology is off, because a shipper doesn't care really in the end of the day about the technology. It's a means to an end. And if you cannot meet a shipper where he or she is at in terms of quality of service, in terms of what they need to do to actually run their operation, you have nothing. So that's some of us. Now, unfortunately, actually, I do also view our role, it's not just Uber Freight. We're helping just facilitate the basic disruption and change of technology to the entire logistics ecosystem. And I emphasize the word ecosystem, because there's tons of innovation happening across the board in this ecosystem. The new logistics stack, warehousing, truckload, less than truckload. There's a host of basic disruptions. We view our role in actually building a bridge. Because for a lot of those startups, the hardest thing to actually do is to gain the trust or the connection or the bridge to a scale cheaper operation. And we fundamentally see our role in also helping facilitate that, because it's, in the end of the day, the biggest barrier. If you're a Fortune 500 SVP of logistics, the mental jump you need to make to entrust your critical business with a startup that may or may not go out of funding, that may or may not fully proven themselves, is actually big. And we view our role in trying to condense that gap and really facilitate the entire ecosystem at scale with those shippers as well.
Hi, my name's Andrew Boyle. Thank you for coming. The animation you showed at the end with respect to how these self-driving technology will be applied showed that on private property at the terminal depot, that will be manned, but long haul would be, or line haul would be self-driving. So many of your peers have come to the opposite conclusion, where when you're on private property in a constrained area and you have a repetitive task, that the AI would be more applicable in that application. So whereas there are many more variables, I think, as you guys have learned the last couple of years when you go in a long haul environment. So can you comment as to how whether you still think that animation portrays your philosophy or conclusion relative to how some of your peers feel?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking this. So yes, thank you. I will refine my answer. You're absolutely right. Things will and are automated on private properties today. We have some colleagues here from the port community. There are major ports globally that are almost fully automated. There are multiple interesting startups that are doing super interesting deployment in elderly communities, in military bases, in a lot of other closed environments for logistics and for passenger. So yes, absolutely. I do think we will see, and we are seeing a lot of self-driving and automation deployments on private properties. For us, we view our role in really helping boil the bigger ocean, because once you actually go on public grounds, there's a host of technical challenges, regulation challenges, public trust challenges that you need to overcome, and we think we can bring a lot of value to that, and we think we can bring a lot of value of really augmenting the network that we're building on both the car and the truck side on Uber as a public network, essentially, with the self-driving technology. So there's room for both. Not picking, we're just focusing on the public realm, but there's definitely going to be a lot of deployment. I'm not sure the technology is that transferable. Everything looks the same from the sort of a distance. Oh, it's self-driving car and trucks and private property, When you go into the weeds, there's actually different requirements to be solved, different speeds, different constraints, different regulation, different use cases. And as you actually try to solve the 99.9999 percentile of the problem, the more they actually diverge. So we're just very focused on the public use case, and there's a lot of other great companies focusing on the private one.
Hello, my name is Dirk Mattfeld. I have understood the demand side of what I would call B2C market. However, most of transportation is B2B market. So what is your answer to supply chain? What is your answer to shippers which try to lower the inventory by a regular frequency of deliveries in long-term lasting contracts, and that is the main part of transportation actually. So is there an answer to that side of the world?
Absolutely, thanks for asking. So to clarify, our entire business is B2B. There's no C in our business. The C, I mean, the drivers are playing a part. We think about them as consumers sometimes, but the entire logistics change and what we're supporting is businesses to businesses. Warehouses to warehouses, distribution center to distribution center. We're actually now the biggest B2B business in Uber, and really part of our job is actually to build Uber's B2B business and muscle, and really transform or help build also really an enterprise thinking at Uber as well that is traditionally a consumer company. So we're very focused on B2B, and a lot of discussions we have with customers is exactly around that. How can they manage their inventory more efficiently? How can they tie the feedback loop between inventory and truckload much faster? How can they actually get into sort of real-time inventory and real-time closing of the transportation needs? So we are extremely focused on the B2B use case. B2C is interesting. We have a last mile arm as well, which we're using today to deliver foods. But the focus for us on the freight side is primarily 100% on B2B actually. Does that clarify?
Hi, name is Otto, by the way, big fan.
Great name. Love it. How do you spell it? How do you spell it?
OTTO.
Really?
Yes.
Amazing. Wow. I'll get you a t-shirt.
Thank you. So part of the reason why transportation, in particular when you're teaming up with owner-operators, is so profitable is because the owner-operator owns a lot of the risk, owning the asset. a big pain point would be repairs and doing all the maintenance. What does Uber Freight, or how do you address those other pain points?
Great question. So you're absolutely right. If we just solve for how he or she gets the demand, that will just be part of the equation. But if we don't fundamentally help those businesses grow wings, then we're not going to be successful, and they're not going to be successful. So it happens to be, Uber is the biggest fuel purchaser in the US. Uber is the biggest insurance purchaser in the US. There's a couple of other biggest. So we can actually use that goodness in the service of truck drivers and offer them actually discounts. Let me walk to my wallet and show you this. This is actually basically our loyalty program. So basically a slew of services from fuel to insurance to maintenance to tires to lease trucks to everything we can actually do to help those businesses scale much more effectively. And really now, if you're sort of a fully loaded owner-op on that card and using all your services, your average cost compared to not using that is actually fundamentally lower, and allows to really equate the playing field and level the playing field with the owner-ops and some of what the big fleets can enjoy with their buying power. So very, very focused on that.
Hi, I'm Robert, originally from Belgium, so thank you for your exciting talk. In Europe, there's a lot of buzz about collaborative shipping, about the physical internet, and it is said that this type of collaborative shipping may facilitate a shift towards, for instance, intermodal rail, which is better for the environment. So my question is twofold. One is, what are your plans about expanding to Europe? And second is, do you have any plans about expanding it towards or to include also intermodal rail transport?
Great question, thanks for asking. There's a synergy because the first thing we moved on the self-driving truck is beer, actually. So it's good sequencing. So we are very excited about Europe. It's the third biggest transportation market globally, right? So US is $700 billion, Europe is $509 billion after China. The same fundamental challenges are facing the industry in Europe. The same fundamental truck capacity, the same fundamental inefficiencies, the same fundamental shippers we have pleased and built trust. It took us time with those global shippers have asked us to go and help solving some of those challenges in Europe. And Uber has a big presence in Europe as well. So all of that has actually led us to launch in Europe, where we actually deployed and moved our first load last month. So we started operation out of Amsterdam, Belgium soon, and we're scaling across Europe. We do fundamentally believe we can bring a lot of that technology to the European market. There's some differences. In Europe, less owner-ops, much medium-sized fleets, contracting and subcontracting is looking different. So it's a different market, but the fundamental technology building blocks could be deployed as well. And we're very excited about what we've done in Europe to date. We also excited about the potential environmental impact where we should actually derive by doing collaborative shipping and helping solve supply chain equations better and helping shippers actually join forces in a more effective way. That's what we see as our potential contribution to the environment issues. We are not focused right now on intermodal.
Hi, my name is Lee. I'm an MBA student from Kellogg's School of Management.
Go Kellogg.
Yeah, my question is about the concept of platooning. A lot of people say that autonomous trucking is pretty far down the road, but in the near term, there might be a model that could work in which the first truck, and the trucks travel in a fleet, the first truck is manned, the second and third and fourth truck might be autonomous following the first truck. Does Uber see a future where that's really the operational model? And if so, how would Uber Freight incorporate that mode of operations into its business?
Great question, thank you. Platooning. So never say never, and I love the experimentation going on in the market. It's definitely from a technology point of view, a lower hanging fruit and something that could be done probably sooner. However, we're in logistics, and in logistics, everything is about the network. So two realities that in my mind, my humble personal opinion, is going to make this challenging to actually scale. First, think about what it actually takes to platoon something. You need, let's say, 2, before we can go to fancy 3 or 4. You need like 2 trucks being in the same place at the same time, ideally from the same company. Otherwise, you need to do intercompany accounting. I save 3% of fuel, and you save 2% of fuel. So like the 5 cents should go here and not there. Like, it's actually very hard to do that across fleets. Once you start multiplying the probabilities, you get actually a very small subset that can actually be platooned across the network. Okay, so you found your small subset, congrats. Now you actually need to do this. And the reality is you get some fuel efficiency, but the trucks are getting extremely more sophisticated by the day. And they're actually extremely smart on fuel savings today by doing super smart stuff on the engine side, on the understanding the geography side, on a bunch of other things. Then the saving you get is actually relatively minimal. And the second you have any disruption in the business, trying to platoon in Europe, you'll have dozens of disengagements over the course of 100 kilometers. Then you basically lose a lot of those fuel efficiencies, and the overall equation probably doesn't work out. So that's our humble view. Will be extremely excited to be proven wrong, and it's actually some very impressive teams working in platooning, and I wish them well, and I'm rooting for them to succeed. But that's sort of the mathematical logistics equation they will need to solve for platooning to be a thing and for platooning to scale.
Hi, sorry. Jim Wicks, Northwestern Siegel Design Institute. What I loved your presentation. I liked the progression and the history because I think that plays a big part of things. Found it interesting with Google Maps being open spawns something like enables Uber, right, in terms of innovation. What do you imagine Uber is going to? What's Uber going to innovate or enable in terms of innovation? Similar as Maps, you're able to leverage Maps into Uber and do what you're doing so much in terms of Uber. What's after Uber for somebody else?
Hopefully everything.
Because I think that's what's wonderful about something like Google and Maps is that it's open and it allows others to innovate off of it. You're going to be in the same position. So.
Yes. So it's a great question, and actually I don't have an answer, but I'll give you my frame of mind. No, because I think you're touching on the open versus close. So I will state my bias. I fundamentally believe in open systems, and I fundamentally believe in sharing the love and sharing the goods, and the only way for us to advance as an industry is actually being open and to facilitate the exchange of goods and ideas and technology. Now, that's how, to your point, Google enabled other stuff. That's how Uber today is enabling a bunch of use cases around elderly and kids and airports and moving goods around. So we want to be open. We're working on an API and ways to plug into the system. I think the trick with and we've been in some early innovation. Jim and I actually used to work together, so thank you for asking that question, on a lovely company named Motorola out of Chicago. When you innovate in a new category, it's very hard to actually open things up because like the ground is like shifting under you all the time, and it's just futile to like try and support a partner ecosystem on top of that. So I think we're at this rapid innovation stage where we're just iterating on like the technology and the end-to-end business like twice a week. And as such, it's very hard to build a stable ecosystem on top. I think once we get to some maturity, definitely want to open things up. As to what use cases will that emerge? I don't know. I mean, we saw some examples: self-driving, warehousing, smart inventory management. I think we'll see a lot of those use cases. I'm just excited to see what else people will come up with.
Hi, my name's Mike Ellis. I'm just curious what you see as the future for freight brokers and third-party logistics company, within this framework.
It's a great question. And so I think, first of all, I have utmost respect to everyone doing that. And the first thing I'll actually confess, I didn't know anything about logistics 3 years ago. I'm not sure I know that much even today. And we have pioneers, I don't know if they're in the audience or not, but we have people that have built amazing innovation in this industry, and I have amazing respect to everyone that sort of came and built that industry. And I think this is going to be a long game to play, and this is a ginormous industry with plenty of room for multiple players. Specifically, inherently, the nature of this industry, if I'm a shipper, and we've done some procurement in Motorola before, you always want a double source or triple source. So by definition, it would be very hard, I think, for anyone to consolidate. There will always, by definition, be few structural big players. So I feel great about that. As to the smaller brokers, I think time will tell. And I think, like anything else, technology, it's not us. Technology is basically stepping up the requirements and what it takes to actually run a business effectively. And I think we'll see some brokers that are sort of jumping on that and morphing their business either from a focus perspective to focus on sectors where they can add a lot of value, or to really embrace the innovation and sort of find how can they provide value on top. And I think we will see a natural cycle where some of those companies will adapt and prosper, and some of those companies eventually will see consolidated, and that's something just like the pace of technology. The top 5 brokers used to own maybe 20-25% of this industry 5 years ago. Now they're almost 40%. So there's definitely a wave there, and we'll see where this will take us.
Hi, I'm Lama. So I have a question, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The model seems mostly tailored toward truckloads. So I'm wondering if an LTL option or a pooling option similar to an Uber pool would be something that Uber Freight is looking at, and how attractive is that market, and how would you have to adjust maybe your technology to take into account the different operational requirements for such a service? That's it. Thank you.
Great question. Extremely excited about pooling anything. Anything we can pool, better. The essence of Uber is on pooling stuff, right? And really the only way to actually get people and cars out of the road and help the environment is actually getting them sitting together in a car and limiting some of those cars on the road. Same for freight, same for logistics. We've obviously built a lot of smart algorithms of how to do that at scale, like millions of pooling transactions a second at Uber. And obviously there's a lot we can bring to bear on the logistics side. We've done a baby step a few weeks ago of basically just really supporting what's called multi-stop at scale, which is the ability to have multiple stops and multiple drop-off and pick-up points as part of the end-to-end technology infrastructure. As to actual pooling, I think that will probably come later on. As my colleagues here, the experts know, it's extremely hard to actually pull something together. It's a very complicated coordination issue, and you really need a lot of scale to be able to do that. And what I've learned, my roots are a product person, the most important product in this business is your network. And the denser we build our network and the denser we can actually have those shipments, the more we can actually derive goods and we can actually start pooling. So definitely coming in the future, and we're just taking baby steps towards that.
So I get to ask the last question.
Yes.
Which is, what advice or what would you say to a student who might be contemplating a career choice, possibly in logistics, but how would you entice them, I guess, to go into this field?
First of all, I will congratulate them on choosing wisely to begin with on being in logistics. Because I'm new to logistics, and I think many people, that's a question I ask myself a lot. Why do we not see more innovation? I think many people go to stuff they know versus actually thinking about holistically what are the major pain points we need to solve in society. So congratulations to the students that actually chose logistics, because I fundamentally believe this is a huge frontier of innovation, and this is the more I learn, the more I'm just fascinated by the complexity and opportunity. So first, I think you've chosen wisely. I think that the advice I will give is maybe two advices. One is like, I think people, especially young in their career, are a bit actually less reluctant to do stuff that they don't know. So always take the leap on stuff that you don't usually actually know. Don't only go to opportunities where you sort of scoped everything out, you know everything. Actually, I think the journey of learning something new, of experiencing a new market is rejuvenating. It will extend you, it will grow you, it will develop you personally. I found it in my career, going from the military, to geo and maps, to building consumer hardware, to now in logistics. Every new domain just expands you as a person. So just don't be fearful of going and jumping into the unknown. And second, just go into an environment that will actually provide you those challenges and provide that high growth and high ability to actually iterate and learn and develop new muscles. I know of one of those environments, but there's many, many more that you can choose to go in Chicago or elsewhere.
So are you recruiting?
Not at all. Not at all. We have a great office in downtown, and we are expanding. I'm actually very excited, actually not recruiting, but actually I have a very warm place in my heart to Chicago from Motorola days, and we've built a great company together in Chicago. So just very excited to actually reinforce Chicago being the hub of logistics innovation in the US, and we're investing a lot in the city, including, we just announced a few weeks ago, we're going to actually open Uber's first engineering technology office in Chicago. And we're actively actually hiring engineers to really be coupled and stay close to our business operation team, so we can really sort of unlock even faster, rapid rate of innovation. So very excited about that.
Thank you very much, Lior, for a most engaging and stimulating presentation. Please join me in thanking Lior for...
Thank you.